Hello everybody and welcome again to another video of Flight Simulator 2020, and today we are going to tackle a few pointers on how to use the Cessna 152. This is a trainer aircraft with a single piston engine, which should be fairly easy to fly and use. It has some basic instruments, so I recommend new pilots and all new flight simmers to start off with using the Cessna 152. And let's go ahead and dive inside the cockpit and see what instruments are inside. So as you can see, if you look at the panel, it has some basic instruments: the airspeed indicator, it has the attitude indicator, you get the altimeter, the heading indicator, the turn and slip or turn coordinator, vertical speed indicator. Here are your VOR indicators. This is the airspeed indicator, and another instrument for the ADF, bearing indicator, and this would be your ammeters, which shows if you are getting enough charges or electricity to your aircraft. Here is your radio panel, which you can go ahead and just tune into the control towers, and it's also where you're going to be able to tune into navigational radio frequencies such as the VOR, ILS, and whatnot. We'll be tackling those topics in a later video. Let's just remove the yoke temporarily so that we'd be able to see what's underneath. Here is your fuel quantity, the parking brakes, oil temperature, oil pressure, carburetor heat, throttle, mixture, flap levers, cabin air, cabin heat, which we will not be using since we are in a tropical country setting right now. We are currently loaded up at Busuanga Airport, which is in Coron, Palawan, in the Philippines. Here are your circuit breakers. Here is the elevator trim, which is a very important flight control surface. For this specific aircraft, it stabilizes your flight. We'll explain that later on once we get in the air. Here are the switches for the lighting of the aircraft: taxi lights, landing lights, beacon lights, strobe, navigation lights or nav lights, the pitot heat, and the dome lights. Going to the left, here is your key master switch. You got the off, right, left, and both magneto option here, and if you're gonna start the engine, you will turn this key switch to the start position. Here is the master switch for the alternator and the battery, and here is your primer to get your engine going. For example, the engine is cold, you pump a little bit of fuel to your engine, to your carburetor, so that it would ignite. So yeah, those are the basic parts of the panel right here. Normally this one right here is the microphone, but it's not modeled for flight simulator use because we're using microphone from the PC. So let's just go ahead and try and power up the aircraft. Let's use a few checklists here from the internet. Let's see. So yeah, cabin preparation checklist number 1. Normally we would check any discrepancies from the inspections. uh, you would normally do a 360-degree check, walk around. What you do there is walk around the aircraft from the external parts of the aircraft, see if there are uh, anything that needs to be inspected, like any physical damage, corrosion, any loose screws, bolts, any cracks that might lead to or that might endanger the aircraft or you. um, and you'd also need to check the fuel tanks manually by stepping outside. There is a step that you can step on here. Yeah, that one. So just step on that ledge right there and open up the fuel caps here. See if there are any fuel. Inspect the propellers. See if there are any damages that needs to be looked upon, and check the tire pressures if the tires are too soft, or are they too inflated, so that you can just tell your mechanic that there is something wrong with the aircraft. Just let them know. It's really important, so we don't want to go airborne with something that is very really dangerous, and you can just prevent it from a walk around inspection. So from there, going around the aircraft, checking outside parts of the aircraft, you will then go inside the aircraft, inspect the panel, see if all the switches are off. So starting with the ignition switch, it must be off. The master switch, you can then turn the master switch on, see if you've got enough fuel for your flight, which in my case I got um, both tanks to half full, which is fairly okay with this flight that we're doing right now. Uh, check the flaps if they would move. So I set it to flaps 30. There we go. So it's okay. That's working. And I would then turn off the master switch, since I can see that everything in front of me is working, and make sure that the fuel shut off valve is on there. This is really important. If this is turned off, the aircraft would not start up, or if for example there is some residue fuel inside the engines, it would seem that the aircraft is working, but then when you go airborne, it would shut off by itself because it does not have any connection to your fuel lines anymore. So you really need to make sure that the fuel valve is set to on. All right, so let's move on with the checklist. So before starting, engine checklist. Pre-flight inspection is complete. Passenger briefing is complete. Seatbelts and seats adjusted or fastened. Let's assume that it is already done. Brakes test. Just normally you would just tap the brakes using your foot. Yeah, and make sure that the brakes has enough brake fluid. Normally it would feel that it is too soft. If the brakes are kind of hard, that means it has brake fluid inside of it, so, or hydraulic fluid inside of it. So that's what we are looking for. Now avionics must be off. Make sure that the circuit breakers are all in. And yeah, fuel shut-off valve is on. Now we're gonna go ahead and start the engines. Mixture must go to the rich position. Carb heat must be cold, which it is. If it is pulled, that means it is on, or yeah. If it is pushed in, that means it's in the cold position. Master switches are going on, and since there is power in the aircraft, we are gonna turn on the beacon lights to let everyone outside the aircraft that the aircraft is active. Now the key switch must be in ignition, so we're gonna turn it. But before we do that, yeah, the key. Yeah, you need to make sure that the key is in the ignition switch, which we do have the key right here. For primer, since this is the first time that we are starting up the engine, let's pump the primers. Normally, we pump it 3 times if it's the first flight of the day. So we'll do that. 1, 2, and 3. That should be enough. At this point, we're gonna have to let everyone outside the aircraft that we're gonna be starting the engines. So normally we'll say prop clear, and ignition switch goes to start. There you go. And the throttle gets moved. Yeah, just push the throttle a little bit and maintain 1000 RPM for idling. There we go. So that's 1000 RPM. That's what we are looking for. And make sure that the oil pressure is rising as well as the oil temperature, since the engine has already started. Make sure that the ammeter is also active, so that's also good. Make sure that the flaps are up. Radios, avionics must be on. So which it is already on. We're also gonna turn on the transponder. Or set it to standby first. And at this point, we're gonna taxi the aircraft going to the run-up area. Normally, to do a run-up check, you need to face the wind. So let's see if there is a wind cone nearby for reference. Okay, so the wind is coming from our left side. The left side is east, so let's face east. So park and brake off. And let's move the aircraft. There we go. So, run up before takeoff. Cabin doors must be closed and latched. Flight controls free and correct, which it is. Yeah. So, check the flight controls. Left aileron. Right aileron. Neutral. Elevator up, down, rudders left, right, all good. Flight instruments check and set. Make sure the altimeter is set to the correct barometric pressure. Alright, let's just maintain 1000 RPM for now. There. Okay. Elevator trim must be set for takeoff, which kind of is. Yeah. Brakes are set. Throttle goes to 1700 RPM, 1700. Alright, 1700 RPM. Alright, let's do a magneto check to see if there are any drops with the RPM. So first we'll go to left. Both. Alright, just a little bit more. About 50 RPM drop. Right. Yeah, about 70 or 60. And both. Okay. Magnetos seem to be okay. Carb heat test. Pull to on. Notice a little bit of drop there. So if you push it in, it would increase the RPM ever so slightly. The ammeters are charging, which is fine. Engine instruments, temperature, and pressure are all good. Everything is on green. Suction gauge must be checked, which it is fine as well. Okay, so now we're gonna throttle idle. Just pull the throttle. Throttle friction lock adjusted. This one right here, which should be okay. Lights as required. Radios, avionics set. Transponder set to alt or altitude. Alright. Which should be good with that. So now we're going to be taxiing towards the active runway and take off from there. Okay, so we're going to be setting flaps 1 for takeoff. At this stage, we should notify the traffic around us that we are taxiing towards the active runway. But since we are all alone here, we do not have any players. We are not on VATSIM as well, so we're good with just taxiing to the runway. Just focus on flying the aircraft. Alright. Landing lights on. Strobe lights on. Nav lights on. Alright. And we'll just backtrack a little bit here to face the active runway. And there we go. Now to take off, just push the throttles fully, slowly. There we go. Release the brakes. Maintain runway center line. Check the instruments. Everything is on green. Airspeed is alive. When we reach 60, we will rotate. 60, rotate. Airborne, tap the brakes. Alright. Landing lights coming off. Flaps up. There we go. Just a little bit of trim to maintain stability. Maintain 70 knots for the climb. And now we are turning left, crosswind. Just maintain the climb, and we'll just maintain 1,000 feet, or we'll just make 1,500 for our traffic pattern here because of the mountainous area we got going. Keep climbing. Alright, we're now turning left downwind, maintaining 70 knots. To control the airspeed, just push and pull on the yoke. So if you push on the yoke, the airspeed increases, and if you pull back on the yokes, it will decrease. We'll maintain 1,500 here. Decrease the throttle. We'll correct the altitude here. Well, let's maintain 1,500. So I'm decreasing the throttle. Still on downwind. Checking the runway. Alright. Okay, 1,500. Increasing the throttle to 2,000 RPM for cruising. Okay, if I alright, let me just decrease the RPM a little bit. So it's still climbing, so let's adjust a little bit of trim. There we go. Alright. Landing lights on. We are abeam the threshold. Let's start our descent. Alright. Now we are descending. And we will be making a left turn shortly for the base turn. Alright. Little bit of trim. There we go. And turning base. Push, or I mean pull on the yoke a little bit because it's dropping the nose. Look outside, see if the runway is in sight. Alright, I can see the runway. Turning final. Pull on the yokes a little bit. We are going too fast. Flaps 1. We're a little bit too high. Oh, a little bit of wind there. Make sure the airspeed is within white arc. There we go. Oh. We've got a little bit of wind here. Flaps 2. Push a little bit. We are still too high here. Flaps 3. Alright, maintain glide speed of 60. Pull back on the yokes. Throttle to idle. There we go. Flaps 1. Advance the throttles to full. We're gonna take off again. $60 knots. And rotate. Landing lights off. 300 feet. Maintain 70 knots. And turning crosswind. Still maintaining 70 knots. Push, pull a little bit, and keep climbing up until 1,500. Alright, we are on crosswind and we will be turning downwind. Keep on climbing. Maintain airspeed 70 knots. Pull on the yoke. Maintain 70 knots. And alright, we are approaching 1,500 feet. Decrease the throttles. push the nose forward a little bit. Keep on maintaining the heading and adjust the altitude a little bit. There we go. 2,200 RPM seems about good enough for this. Alright, so there's the runway. Oh, correcting altitude. We forgot to retract the flaps, but that's okay. We are still within the white arc. Alright, and we should start the descent right about now. Give it a little bit of decrease the RPM a little bit here, about 1,800 RPM or 1,700. There. And we're going to make the base turn in a short while. Alright, turning base. Keep on descending. Alright, turning final. Landing lights on. Flaps 2. Alright. Maintain airspeed 65. Just maintain airspeed 65. We are on glide slope. Add a little bit of power if we go a little bit too low. Flaps 3. Alright, maintain runway center line. Oh, we got a little bit of wind here. I think the wind is coming from to our left forward side, so we'll just face the wind right about there. Alright, there we go. Just maintain airspeed 60 to 65. Once we reach the runway, level off and then chop the power. Don't make sure not to let the nose to fall. Oh, correcting. Alright, level off and then chop power. Oh, a little bit of float here. There we go. Tap the brakes and there. Taxi towards the terminal. Retract the flaps. Landing lights off, taxi lights on. It's quite windy today, so it was a little bit of challenging, but it was okay. The aircraft was not that hard to control, but oh, and by the way, I'm using a yoke stick, a Logitech flight stick, so it's not ideal to use for this type of aircraft. If given a chance, I would be getting um, the flight yoke and the rudder pedals for the Cessna 150 for this. But yeah, it was still manageable, so it was okay. All right, so at the terminal, parking brakes on, and to turn off the engines, just pull on the mixture. It should turn off by itself, and then make sure everything is turned off. Key switch to off and master switch to off. Alright. All lights to off. Transponder off, and the radios are now off as well. And that's about it. That's a very short flight and introduction to the Cessna 150. There are a few advanced procedures for the Cessna 150 as well. That would be for emergency procedures and all that. But we will be tackling those topics in a later video. So make sure to tune in and wait for that to come out. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video for today, and see you again in the next video. Peace out.